Hello and welcome to the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Robert Bowlesby here with you. You could tweet me at rbowlesbyjr. You could tweet the Greater STL Sports Network at Greater STLSN. For any comments, suggestions, updates, or anything like that on the network, use them two Twitter handles, or you can email me at rbowlesbyjr314 at gmail.com. On the rundown for today's show, we'll get to the little stadium as a lot of the information's come out over the past 2 weeks on all three stadiums. But we'll mostly talk about the St. Louis stadium as lawsuits and other things have been going on. And then we'll pretty much just go all around after that, including the hometown rundown. But first we'll start it off with some Cardinals baseball. And it's kind of funny to see that with Wainwright out and some of the injuries you had to this pitching staff, that most of these pitchers haven't missed a beat. There was probably a week there where Lynn didn't have it, Lackey didn't have it, and Carlos didn't have it really at the beginning of this month. And now it's all coming in line. But when we last talked, which was last Monday, it seemed like everything was okay with the Cardinals, lineup-wise and pitching-wise. We scored 10 runs, 10 and then 9 runs in back-to-back games, so it looked like the offense was coming around, along with the pitching staff that's been there all season long. But the Cardinals have dealt a big blow on Tuesday as Matt Adams got injured, and he's going to be out to 3 to 4 months. Now, with the way that Adams has been playing this season, not with all the power, not hitting with runners in scoring position, and also not hitting with that high average, this is actually a lot bigger deal than most think. Because the only backups first baseman are your starters, and then Reynolds. Reynolds is your bench guy, and the only person you have on the bench. And then your secondary bench guy is Randall Grichuk, but he's playing so well you got to keep him in the lineup. So this injury becomes a big deal for the Cardinals. Not just with their starting lineup, but with their bench. Because if you lose Reynolds and then you have to play Grichuk in certain situations versus left-handers when Hayward's out there, and with the last few days with Holiday being sick, you lose all the luster off your bench. I mean, the Cardinals literally have nobody else on their bench past Reynolds or Grichuk. You got Tony Cruz, Pete Kozma, and then Ed Easley. Yes, Ed Easley. Nobody knows who Ed Easley is, and really he's your third-string catcher who was probably brought up here just to play as an emergency third baseman. So with the offense really struggling except for your certain guys, when you get to the bottom of the lineup, this is a big thing that can affect the Cardinals. Now, you know Reynolds has the power, but the problem has been the average and the strikeouts. Now, he's in a good run here, but if he gets to where he's struggling, you have nobody to back him up. And then you hear a lot about these trade talks, maybe getting Ryan Howard, maybe getting Adam Lynn, or some other guys on that list. Justin Morneau, Ben Zobrist is on that. There's also a little lesser-known guy in Justin Smoke. But even if you try to trade for a secondary player like that, you don't have nobody to really trade him for. I mean, your best bet to trade somebody now that's in the minors is Piscotty, and with his talent, and also coming up as a third baseman, so he could probably play the first base, you might need him in the long run. So then you go to your maybe lesser tier guys, and I can't really name one off the bat that the Cardinals could give up and get something valuable out of them. I mean, you got guys down there, Greg Garcia, he's not your everyday guy. We've tried that already. You got Scruggs, but the Cardinals seem like they're kind of trying to playing him into their first baseman of the future thing. but he struggled down in AAA this year. You maybe got Easley. Maybe that's what the Cardinals are trying to use as a ploy, bringing guys like Easley up. And then also with another guy down there, Cody Stanley, who's another catcher down there, is maybe trying to show teams that they're major league ready to get maybe a lesser known talent like an Adam Lynn. But the funny thing about the guys you're trying to get, they're just Mark Reynolds except left-handed. Justin Morneau would be your best bet there. But he's been so up and down the last few seasons, you don't know what you're going to get out of him. Now, he had a great year last year in Colorado. But is that due to the elements in Colorado? Or is he kind of back on track after the concussions and some of the injuries he had? But the offense is really what's taking a first place, best team in the league pitching staff down with it. Now, your worst start was Michael Wacha in the last week or so. And he still went 5 2/3 and 5 innings of no-hit baseball. And in that game, you got to kind of look at that and say with the rain delay and then the 2 warm-ups, that he probably threw a lot more than what you say is the 111 pitches that he threw. And that's going to cause stress in your innings. I mean, he went into that 6th inning of that game against the Dodgers with a no-hitter and just struggled to get outs. Now, you might have went with him too long, knowing that he was in a stressful situation and what his pitch count was. But the problem is when you look down at that bullpen, other than Villanueva in that situation, who else could you bring in? You could bring in Belial, but that guy's been pitching just as much as Villanueva has. You have gone to Mitch Harris in some of these situations, and now he's finally starting to struggle. As you can see that maybe working on as much as he has gotten to him. The guy only had, I think, 66 games career in the minor leagues before coming up. But you got these guys right now like Villanueva, Belial, Seagrass has been another one, even though he had a lot of home run the other night, that have really kept this team together. And then you got a guy like Jaime coming back, and essentially, if you go by the rules, has had 3 quality starts, even though he did lose tonight. And yet the guy's only got 1 win, and the 1 win was actually in his worst start. And this team's just not hitting with runners in scoring position. Your highest scoring game over the past week's been 6. You were 3 for 9 in that game, 333. It's pretty good, but after that, you were 1 for 8, 10 left on base. 3 of 12, 11 left on base. You 2 of 5. And then tonight, you couldn't even get the runners in scoring position against a guy that's pitched against the Cardinals very well. I think he had, in his 6 starts, he had the lowest career ERA versus the Cardinals all time. But he's not that good of a pitcher, and this is kind of the series now as we've gone from the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks, and Milwaukee. This is kind of schedule you wanted to hit. You wanted to hit the Diamondbacks. They're not a very good team. And then you wanted to hit the Dodgers after Greinke and Kershaw's already pitched. And then you run into the worst team in the league in Milwaukee. And this is where you need to get your wins. Because the Cardinals do have to play the Dodgers again this weekend. And both of them guys are going in, Greinke and Kershaw. Now you do have your 2 studs going this weekend. Wacha, who has finally got his first loss, 7-1 in his 10 starts. And then Carlos, whose last 3 starts have been phenomenal. 20 in a third innings of scoreless baseball. And this is where you kind of see why the Cardinals really didn't go after a big-name pitcher like Cole Hamels or just somebody like that. Because they've seen the talent that Carlos Martinez possessed, even though might not have seen it because of spring training last year when he was skipped over for the 5th starter's job. And then he came out and struggled, but came back. And then some of his starts that the Cardinals have given him give other guys rest, haven't been all that great. And then entering May, he was phenomenal. And then he had 3 straight starts of horrible pitching, and then he comes back with 3 more. So this is what you kind of want to see from your young guy, to fight through a situation like he did earlier this month, and they come back towards the later in the month and just have 3 phenomenal starts, including the one on Sunday when the Cardinals were celebrating the life of Oscar Taveras, in which that was his major league debut day of last year when he hit that home run. And he goes out 7 innings with only 1 hit, 3 walks, and 8 strikeouts. Only the third 24-year-old Cardinal to do that. And those are under some circumstances that most people couldn't go out there and do their job. They say he was crying while he was in his bullpen when they were celebrating this. So how quick he got over that to get in the game and do what he had to do shows maybe where he's kind of maturing into. I think that your big worry right now is going to be Lance Lynn, as he's just struggled to get out of innings. This guy, the Cardinals talk about stress innings. I mean, this guy has to lead the league in stress innings this year. This ain't the guy that was pounding the strike zone the last couple years. This is the guy that seems like he's nibbling. Maybe he's working too hard, thinking that he's the ace of the staff now while Wainwright's out. I mean, his last start was 4 walks against not a very good hitting team. The Cardinals did end up winning that game. But in that situation against a team like that, you kind of want Lynn to kind of go deeper in that game. But you really couldn't. The 4 walks, that's going to get your pitch count high. But the problem is in these games, I mean, even he went 6 innings in that game. And the Cardinals couldn't pull it out to the 9th, and they had to really win on that lucky play. And that was the game where Borges ends up sliding to the catcher as he's throwing down the first for a double play. Catcher throws off, and Carper ends up scoring. That was also a game where you're 1 for 8 and runners in scoring position. Leave a 10 on base. And it's just something that you can't really keep going at this rate to be a top tier team, even in this division that we're in, and probably one of the worst divisions out right now. But there's no way to change Mike Matheny has been playing the lineups different every day, and it just hasn't seemed to work against the better quality pitching. Now, some of this is, for some reason, the Cardinals just seem to not be able to hit guys they've never faced before, or guys that for some reason just dominate them. I mean, Bartolo Colon was dominant against the Cardinals. You had a guy like Lariano. You finally got to him this year, too, who was dominant. And now a guy tonight like Friars was dominant against them. And then you had another guy on Saturday that dominated the Cardinals. And I really don't count Saturday's game as a bad thing. I mean, you had a very long rain delay, and that's going to affect you when you get into your modes to start going, and then you have to shut it down, and then try to get it back up. I mean, the Waka game that they lost, the only run was on an error in the first inning. After that, it was nothing for the Cardinals. And you know that this pitching staff's not going to keep this up all year. There's going to be some missteps somewhere. I mean, Martinez with an under 3 RNA. Waka at 2.27. Lackey at 2.83. These guys are going to hit roadblocks somewhere. And the Cardinals offense has to break out of their funk. And it's going to be really hard when you lose your starting first baseman and what has mostly been your cleanup hitter this year. Now you kind of switched at his line as Johnny Peralta has just been doing it for the Cardinals in the past few weeks. I mean, if you just look at his stats, you could tell he's the best shortstop in the league, and probably that up the middle combo and Wong and Peralta, they're probably the best second baseman and shortstop in the league right now. But it just seems like Peralta's just every night getting big hits to give this team a chance to win. I mean, just think if he wasn't in the lineup and you had to put Cosma in there. I mean, where does your offense come then? Who do you put in the 4 spot to replace the production that Peralta has put out this season? It just seems like every game, that's the guy that's getting it done for you. I mean, he was even involved in the game-winning run play when Borges knocked the catcher out. So just think if you took a guy like out of the lineup, what would happen to this team with guys like, even though Matt Holliday's up over 320, he's not hitting for all the power and RBI he's been used to. And then you got the top guys getting on base, but after that, the Cardinals just can't get it with runners in scoring position. And I don't see how going to get basically a second-tier offensive player and the guys I just named, maybe with the exception of Ryan Howard, who's probably the best threat on there for the Cardinals to go out and get. Because if you're saying Mark Reynolds isn't not your starter, and that's essentially what everybody's saying, that if we need to go get somebody else. I think you would have to go a little bit better quality than Mark Reynolds to get somewhere. But the problem is if you go that quality, you're going to have to give big names up. And I really don't see it. I don't see this potential of Ryan Howard coming here and being better than he's been at Philadelphia this season. I mean, it's in his contract that he doesn't want to come here for the no-trade clause. And then he's also had the family problems with the missed money management that his brother and his family. I mean, does he want to be close to that when he... And does that cause a distraction for him? I mean, you can look at Adam Land and see that he's basically got the same complex as Mark Reynolds. Not a very high average. Strikes out a lot, but can hit a lot of home runs. And I could see going with the matchups, putting him in maybe against right-handers and Reynolds against left-handers. But I never always seen that concept because a lot of these players grew up hitting nothing but a lot of right-handers. So I don't know if that changes too much in your lineup by just getting a left-handed bat in there. Definitely in a already left-handed heavy lineup. Wong, Carpenter, Hayward's in there. Jay's in there. Also. So that's 4 guys out of 8 that are already left-handed. You had 5 in there with Adams. So, I mean, maybe this injury kind of helps you in breaking up the lineup a little more. So teams can't go at you with them left-handed specialists or play the stats, essentially. But the hitting problem's not just at first base. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, you have 10 hits in a game that you don't win to the 9th. And it caused a fluke play for you to win it. You had to tie the game. You were losing going into the 9th, and Hayward ends up tying it for you to get you even in that situation. So I don't see all the problems being with just Matt Adams / Mark Reynolds. Other guys in this lineup have to start hitting in key situations. They can't just hit in certain situations and everything be okay. It's nice to see. You threw a lineup the other day that the first 6 guys were all batting just under or over 300. And that was the day that you had Grichuk batting 4th. So you see the high averages, but you see the Cardinals struggling to score runs. You can't just blame that all on Adams, even though he was in the spot where most of the runs are going to come from. But you got to look now. That's what's been saving you, and it's guys that you just didn't really think about. Matt Belisle, Carlos Villanueva, and even Rosenthal's is killing it. And you can look at Rosenthal and say he's got the 15 saves at .74 ERA and just say, well, it's close. He's only throwing one inning. But he's been in some key situations. He's the guy that you've been sending out there in the tie games on the road. He's the guy you sent out in the 14th the other night when you were running out of pitchers. Now, they lost the game in the inning of the game, but he hasn't just been pitching in the situations for most closers pitching. When you look at a guy like Villanueva, 21 innings this year, a whip of .90, ERA of .43. And I was complaining all spring training and the beginning of the season that this is what we're going into our bullpen with a guy. My complaint was that a guy like Mitch Harris pitched way better than Villanueva did. And now all of a sudden the kind of roles have kind of reversed. But this is a guy that came in with a over 4 ERA for his career, and now he comes to the Cardinals, and it just seems like you bring these just weird names in the Cardinals bullpen and rotation, and they seem to just get the job done. I mean, a Pat Neshek of last year, he had guys like Woody Williams, Kent Bottenfield, a Matt Morris, just guys like that came into the system and changed their careers guys went out left here and got big contracts and just were never the same. And I don't know if it's the system or the Cardinals just see a little something that not everybody else could see. But it's really worked out for them. And maybe that's why you could bring in a guy and maybe, like Lynn from the Brewers, give them maybe a Garcia and maybe a Tuilava, who's a pretty good closer down in Memphis, and you take on Edelman, and then they basically give up the contract to Loesch, and he comes here. I mean, that's the only way I could see a deal like that working. Like, even in a Harang deal, you would want to get something else out of Aaron, other than Aaron Harang, that will help benefit this team if you're going to give something good up. But you kind of what Matheny said is you hear all this clamoring for maybe Halladay to move to first base. And you hear a lot of guys who moved from first base to the outfield and back and forth said it's a lot harder to go from the outfield to first base because the ball gets on you quicker. You have to make a lot more stressful plays with the scoops and stuff. And they were all like, no, Halladay can't do it. Blah, blah, blah. Then Matheny comes out. And when asked about your first base options, just in case you go in extra innings or something, and he names the usual guys, Cosma, a Cruz, a Molina. But then he just throws in there, and I think this is for the B-Fib, so they can get their panties in a bunch, and he tells John Jay might be a first base alternative. And I'm surprised you didn't just see the whole world blow up, because Cardinals fans will do that. Oh man, Halladay can't do it, but John Jay can. And you kind of got to look at that situation as athleticism. And also a guy like Halladay who's 34 years old, playing his whole career in the outfield and coming to first base. So a little fun by Matheny there. I don't know if he was having fun or not, but a little fun if you look at it in my situation. With all the clamoring for Halladay to go here and for him to throw Jay in the mix. The one person, and I should have kind of made this in there, the one person I hope we don't see in the mix at first base all that often is Yachty. Because just like at first base, there's nothing after Yachty at catcher. Do you want Tony Cruz in there every day? Do you want Ed Easley in there every day? Do you want Cody Stanley in there every day? So The Cardinals are going to have to make do with what they have. And Beatty's going to have to work some more lineup magic, which he's done pretty much over the last 2 years, to keep this team at the top of the division and fighting for a playoff spot. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to get into the stadium situation next. We'll go to a column that came from the Post-Dispatch from David Hahn next on the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Hello and welcome back to the Sports Blog of the Greater STL Sports Network. Robert Bowlesby here with you. You can tweet me at rbowlesbyjr. You can tweet the network at Greater STL SN. We're going to do a little stadium talk, and I'm going to get to this column from David Hahn, and it was from a couple weeks for going to Post-Dispatch. And kind of the headline kind of explains it all, is what happens to the riverfront if the stadium fails? Question mark, Plan B. Area leaders are working on a plan to redevelop about 180 acres of riverfront real estate just north of downtown, with or without the new football stadium. They call it Plan B, and the project has been in the works for months. It envisions residential towers, hotels, shopping centers, high-tech business incubator, plus wetlands, green space, parks, and it would all stretch more than a mile from the Gateway Arch grounds to the new river bridge. The plan even proposes a floating beer barge and playgrounds. Regional officials have been quietly peddling this to key interest groups. One night last week, some of the project planners met with downtown business and landowners, and their message was simple. With or without the stadium, this is a unique opportunity to spur development on the riverfront. Doug Wardoff, president of the Downtown STL Inc., who's been put in charge of redeveloping this area, says it's our one chance to develop virtually 90 acres on one of the world's greatest rivers next to one of the world's greatest monuments. City and regional leaders insist the region must be prepared to buy soon. Officially, however, the riverfront proposal for this was even in place before there was a Plan A, aka the stadium situation. Last summer, Green Rivers Greenway, who's kind of these people that go around and fix up little areas, turn them into a green space, bike trails and stuff like that. They got involved and put out calls to study business redevelopment and trail building on the river from the Cleves Landing to past the Stan Musial Veterans Memorial Bridge. In November, the Greenway Board picked a group for a $332,000 contract for a study which could be used to seize the land through eminent domain. Now, their plans had to kind of change because, of course, in January, the task force announced their plans for their riverfront stadium, which happened to be right in the middle of the 180 acres being studied. But as soon as these stadium plans were announced, however, planning began to go on two tracks, one with the stadium and one without. Otis Williams, executive director of the City Development Corporations, says this will require a public and private partnership. If the stadium is there, we can build around it. Williams' company donated $82,000 to the group for their forum study to look at redevelopment in an area. Warner have said redevelopment will happen in this corridor. If not, it's not a plan that just will sit on the shelf. Greatest in 2 or 3 years, that will be the real scorecard. Now this is something that we should all look at and be clamoring for. A redeveloped downtown, with or without the stadium, is a good downtown. I mean, you go down the downtown, and you barely want to stay there 3 hours for the game because you're worried about your car being broken into. You're worried about violence happening on the streets. I mean, you got to worry about a lot of things just to go downtown. Like, the big issue for me in this situation would be, how are you going to stop? And I don't know exactly how to say this. How are you going to stop the crime to make this a viable plan? I mean, the police have tried everything. The hot spot policing. A lot of undercover cops working on the beat trying to just be unnoticeable. And you have murders and stuff rising up. And of course, you have the people that don't want to have to pay what they say is their money to redevelop something they're not going to reap all the benefits for. I mean, you have business owners down there and buildings that are worthless. They're worthless buildings. Every building down there is basically a worthless building. Because who really wants to go down there and be in the buildings or use the buildings other than the current owners that are there? And of course, instead of selling it to these people and just getting out of the way and trying to help St. Louis develop, they're of course either stick around for more money or say they're skeptical of the project. But this project is a little different from the ones of recent past, because this is between public and private businesses and people. The other ones before that people have come up with are, you give me this amount of money and I can do this and I'll raise the money my own to do the rest. And that's never happened, of course. Because of people like this, and then also some of your politicians who just want to be the guy that says, oh, I'm for the people, I'm stopping from raising the taxes, I'm stopping this and that. But you're not helping anyone in that situation. You're not helping the people downtown to have a good place to live. Or you're not helping making St. Louis one of the big cities in the United States like it used to be. I mean, it's become flyover country because who's going to go and read online about St. Louis and then want to come here and just hang out? I mean, you can go see the Arch, but after you go see the Arch, there's nothing else really down there to go see. I mean, it's the Arch in the middle of a bunch of land. And they got the little concert venue thing that they have their little fairs at and stuff, but that's all that's around there. So it'd be nice to actually go downtown and see that they're trying to put an effort into it to kind of put it when you go and put the new stadium, or even if you're throwing a Cardinal game or to a Blues game or to even the Edward Jones Dome. It looks like a place where people want to go see football or baseball or hockey or any other sport. But it doesn't look like that right now. I mean, if you go to the Edward Jones Dome now, you're passing nothing but vacant buildings. Tore down buildings halfway. Buildings that have been graffitied over, that have been standing for hundreds of years that people don't want to take down because 100 years ago it was the grocery store or the big hotel. It's time to stop living in the past, living in St. Louis. Because that's what we're doing. We're living off a false hope that St. Louis is going to change back to that old school community with the old school feeling of the brick buildings and things like the Bottle District and all the land. Well, it's not that anymore. And it's never going to be that again. Because who's going to build a worthless building into something that looks halfway decent? I mean, you got finally people around here just tearing down their buildings. I mean, in East St. Louis, they're tearing down basically every historic building they got because they're just getting so old and becoming an eyesore. And they're not getting paid off these lands. These people aren't paying for the lands that they own now because they're worthless buildings, and who's going to make them pay? I mean, most of these people probably seen what happened before, all these guys not paying and not staying on track for what they said they were going to do, and they said, why should I? But I don't know if this was before the stadium, if this came about because of the stadium, even though they said it was before. But at least somebody's looking into it. I mean, it does sound like a lot of money, $332,000 just to look into some land. But if it's to redevelop this city, then I'm all for it. But we'll get to a little stadium talk. If you didn't see down there in Hollywood Park for the Stan Musial Stadium, whatever he wants to call it, they imploded the grandstands at the old Hollywood Park race car track. And I don't know how big of a step that is. But to me, that's breaking ground. Because that stuff's got to go either way. So it's a little scary that them kind of things are happening. And then you see things like from San Diego. The Voice of San Diego filed a suit on May 27th for all documents pertaining to their stadium in San Diego and their dealings with LA and Carson. Now, they even said themselves they're probably not going to get any new information out of this. But I guess it's worth the try to do this. But it's kind of like with the St. Louis situation. If you had so long to do it, what's the point of doing it now? And I know it takes a while to put these kind of things together. Definitely legal things. But that's one stadium that was built before the Edward Jones Dome that they've been trying to get a new stadium almost as long as the Edward Jones Dome has been around. And you've heard nothing from nobody until all of a sudden they put this bid in for this Carson Stadium. And now all of San Diego is trying their damnedest to keep the Chargers. But of course your problems persist in the greater St. Louis area. As a group of 6 leaders, led by Rob Schaaf. Who wants to know his name? Because this guy seems like an idiot. And I'm going to get a little on the Democrat side on this one, but this is a story about a suit that's been filed against essentially Governor Jay Nixon and the task force, claiming that taxpayers' money is being spent illegally on the illegal construction of the new football stadium in St. Louis. 6 Missouri legislators are aiming to block the funding of the new stadium, suing Governor Jay Nixon and the board that owns and operates the Edward Jones Dome. The suit, led by Rob Schaaf of St. Joseph, Rob Venesto of Arnold, Jay Barnes of Jeff City, Mark Parkinson of St. Charles, Eric Burleson of Springfield, and Tracy McCready, who's the only Democrat in here, from Olivet. And of course it's Republicans trying to stop other people from paying money out because them money-hungry bastards want it all for themselves. Why should my town pay taxes to St. Louis when they can just pay them to me? Is essentially this in the long run. And maybe these guys are hearing from people, I don't want to pay this. I want to let go of a tax. Basically, is essentially what it would be. It'd be a let go of the tax because they're all paying this to the state to help pay off the dome. But you're already paying it. So if you took this tax off, you'll just find something else to tax for the people to pay. And then probably put it at a percentage point more. Because that's how the politics work. This suit argues that the task force proposal to extend state bonds is illegal. If they want to build the stadium, go ahead. But don't expect the state to pick up the tab, Schaaf said. Unless they come to the legislator and ask permission to go into debt. Or, he countered, Schaaf did, send the matter to a public vote. Or you could send the matter to a public vote. I always trust the people, and if the people want to spend $300 more power to them. Now, these are kind of the basis for the suit here. It alleges that the law written for the dome doesn't allow it to extend the bonds on a stadium that's not basically adjacent to the Edward Jones Dome. The only money that could be spent on these bonds is basically a one-time payment to pay off the stadium, which would be about $100 million. It also says that such a bond extension would stretch the bond issue beyond 50 years, which is something that's against the bond statute. Another point is the law written doesn't work for the new stadium. And basically this is just another thing to say that they couldn't extend the bonds. The law doesn't work to extend the bonds for a new stadium, basically without a vote. It also, another point is the political party representing the board authority cannot have more than 6 members of the same political party. They have 8. I wonder if them 8 are Democrats. Because Jay Nixon is a Democrat. So essentially he's going to have a lot of Democrats running that staff. And also with Francis Slade being a Democrat, you're going to have Democrats running that staff for the Dome Authority. And of course the Republicans don't want the Democrats to have all the say in their situation. Then the final point is to say that the $12 million that the state sent to the Rams in 2014 was not for planning on a new stadium, but was for debt services and maintenance. So I could see part of that going to a debt on the bonds. But if you're already planning on a new stadium, which the Rams, we're going to plan going to that year-to-year lease, then how does it make any sense that you would send them money under the notion it was for debt services and maintenance if it's going to a stadium that you're not going to build up any more than it already is, or they would have done it over the last 20 years because it's not the funnest place in the world. So what they're trying to do is just trying to change the law to be in their favor. And they could say they want the public vote thing, but they only want the public vote because they know that the voting public that's not in St. Louis, at least, is going to vote no if they put these things in their head that if we don't extend these bonds, we don't pay an extra tax. That tax goes away. But the tax still wouldn't go away until the dome's paid off. So essentially the tax is there until that extra $100 million pays off. Now I don't know how long it would take. But if it's taken 20 years to pay off, maybe the dome could have been, at the most, $500 million. Then this loan's going to be here for at least, if you think about it, 4 more years if there's $100 million left. So it's still there no matter either way you look at it for a substantial amount of time. And you got guys like this, they're going to turn it around and make you think that it will go away sometime. but it never will. And this is what's wrong with people's heads is that definitely politics. In politics, they just think if you could get the people to think that you're working for them, you're always going to be the top political guy. They're always going to be voting for you. They're always going to be voting with your party and get it to where basically essentially you're running the show. They don't put the things in their head that this tax is going to be here for this much longer, or that if we took this tax away, we would have to raise our taxes for streets and roads because we've been putting this here or we've been neglecting this. So of course they didn't put it on the context of what's going to happen when we do or do not get a football stadium. What's going to happen with these bonds in the long run. Or what they're going to do with that extra money that they save when they pay these bonds off. But the problem is, if this keeps going like this, there's going to be a public vote. And now Rob Schaff might trust the people, but I don't know if I trust the people, because it's a 40 to 50,000 seat stadium, which essentially in the long run, there's a lot more percentage of people that don't go to the football games that don't really care about that stadium. I mean, some might just think of it as good riddance. They've been bad for 14 years, it seems like. It's been about 10 years. And what do we need them around for? I mean, you didn't hear this guy, Rob Schaaf, say anything about how it helps the community out with the taxes they receive from the stadium and the players and things like that. You got to make it look in a bad way to get your point across. So right now, your stadium, if you're St. Louis, you need to look at it as with Hollywood Park starting to break a little ground, at least getting the grandstands out of that race car or that racing track. But they're starting to move a lot more forward than you are because you're dealing with the lawsuits and all this BS that you're not even thinking about the areas you're going to build on. But the guy you should trust in the business in NFL is John Clayton. He said that Carson Stadium is probably the best stadium for LA. And he thinks it's going to be a done deal and that the Rams stay in St. Louis. But the John Clayton look at some of these politicians and some of these people that are talking against the stadium and see kind of what their agenda is to not keep the Rams in St. Louis. Alright, we're going to take a break. We're going to get the hometown rundown next, right here on the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Hello and welcome back to the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Robert Bowlesby here with you. You can tweet me at rbowlesbyjr. You can tweet the network at Greater STL SN. Alright, let's start this segment off with a little hometown rundown. And St. Louis FC played 2 games this week. First in the U.S. Open Cup, Wednesday night against the Minnesota United FC of the North American Soccer League. And it took 2 overtimes and penalty kicks down there at Soccer Park in Fitton. But the FC advanced to play the MLS team Sporting KC in Kansas City for the 4th round of the Lamar Hunt Open Cup. Minnesota actually scored the first goal of the game after a scoreless first half in the 53rd minute off a rebound. Minnesota United scores, puts them up 1-0. St. Louis FC got the equalizer back in the 80th minute as Charles Rakin draws a penalty kick. And probably the guy that's probably your leading scorer right now, Brian Gall, takes it and he scores. That ties the game up at 1. The game remains tied through regulation and the two 15-minute overtimes. And the game went to penalty kicks. Mark Pace makes the save on the first penalty kick for FC. And then the St. Louis Football Club goes on 3 straight goals. Brandon Barkless, Patrick Duty, and Oscar Geske all scoring a penalty kick. Minnesota loses on its last shot as the last shot bounced off the post, giving FC a win, and they advance in the Open Cup. St. Louis FC had to really go right back to it as they've been playing a lot of games lately, and soccer players aren't used to playing 2 games a week, and really, was it 4 games in 13 days, but St. Louis FC kept it up as they continued the Kings Cup and USL play, playing against the rival Louisville City FC. They were on the road in Louisville, Kentucky. And this game was also consisted of another scoreless half. But St. Louis reversed the roles with Louisville City, as in last game, Louisville City came back from 3 one-goal deficits to tie the game. But in this game, Louisville went up in the 50th minute to go up 1-0. But 20 minutes later, in the 7th minute, a long loft by Patrick Duty gets over the heads of the defenders to Charles Rakin. He gets the goal pass. He ties it up 1-1. That's how the game went in there. The 1-1 tie. St. Louis does get a point on the road. Gets a big point just for the team itself, as playing so many games, and you're not playing in your league in all these games, so you're not getting all these points that you would get if you were winning in the USL. So right now, this is what you're going to have to do, is hopefully, until you get out of this US Open Cup and actually get some time off and things like that, it's nice to go on the road and get the 1 point and not to lose. This runs FC's record to 3-3-3, 12 points in the USL. They play again June 6th on the road against the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. They resume Lamar US Open Cup play on to June 16th, of course, in Kansas City. And it was kind of cool for FC this week, as they got some MLS quality players to kind of help the fatigue and help some of these players get a break. As Mike McGee, the 2013 MLS MVP, and Sloop Product, Kingsley Bryce, are going to be here for a couple games to kind of build up for MLS play. So it's kind of cool to see some guys down here that played in MLS before, and maybe give some of these younger guys some keys to getting to the MLS. You also had the St. Louis Attack play this weekend, as they played their final home game of the season Saturday against the Georgia Fireboards, trying to stay in the playoff race in the X League. They played at the Family Arena. And really what was a defensive dominant game, is the offense wasn't all there for the Attack, which has kind of been off and on this season. It didn't seem like, as they won 55-8. The Attack led throughout this one with DeAndre Jackson winning the X-Dash. He remains undefeated on that in the season. A fumble recovery for a touchdown, defensive stops, and a TD made it more 18-0 after the first half. After a Fury touchdown and defensive stop, Johnny King scored his second touchdown of the game to put the score 26-7. The Tech scored another TD late in the third to put them up 33-8. The Tech didn't turn up on D after that, with a couple sacks and an interception to get a couple points. couple defensive stops. Chris Head gets 2 touchdowns in between. Attack win 55-8. DeAndre Jackson with the next dash win a TD. Chris Head with 2 TDs. Johnny King with 2 TDs. Jason Knoll with 2 sacks, a fumble recovery, a TD, a safety, and of course, your linebacker / kicker also kicked in all the extra points. So, nice well-rounded game for the defense, even though it wasn't the best team in the league that you were playing. It's still nice to go out there and see them only allowed 8 points, plus put up to 55. This runs the Attack's record up to 5-3, and the Attack will not learn their playoff fate until June 8th, when the X League season ends. So I'll be watching for that and see if a football team in St. Louis actually makes it to the playoffs once in a while around here. The River City Rascals also continue their season this week, starting a 3-game series on Tuesday at home against against Washington. The River City Rascals started off game 1 winning 9-5. And Curran Waddell in that game went 3 for 4 and had 6 RBIs. In game 2, the 4-game winning streak that the Rascals were on was ended as Washington won 10-6. The Rascals tried to come back with 5 runs in the 5th, but couldn't close the 9-gap deficit that the Wild Things had built up to that point. The Rascals also lost in game 3 of the series as they were shut out 4-0. Starting pitching held up for the most part. Mark Rutledge went 6 2/3, allowed 6 hits, 4 runs, 5 walks, 6 Ks. But his offense finally slowed down for the Rascals and also the Wild Things in this one. And back-to-back losses, not what you want to see so far for the Rascals. But they continued on Friday as they started a new series against the Scannenberg Boomers. And they blew out the Bloomers in game 1, 14-8. Taylor Ard and again Curran Riddell both were 4 for 5 with a walk in the game. Game 2 was rained out, so they had to play a doubleheader on Sunday, and the Rascals took both games of that one, 3-2, 1-0 respectively. In game 1, the Rascals get a win with a run in the 7th. 6 pitchers come in and hold down the Boomers. And in game 3, Dan Stone pitches a complete game shutout, 5 walks, 6 strikeouts. It said no hits, but kind of think that it would have said, instead of a complete game shutout, he would have pitched a no-hitter. So he could have pitched a no-hitter without anybody knowing. But the Rascals win that one 1-0. The Rascals stay on the road as they open a 3-game series Tuesday against the Lake Erie Crushers. And that's it for your hometown rundown. Now, there was a little fun going on this weekend. If you pay a little attention to Twitter and the NHL playoffs, you had Mighty Ducks coach from the movies, Mr. Coach Bombay, Emilio Estevez, kind of put it to the Chicago Blackhawks on Twitter. Some of his tweets were, "Suck it, Windy City. Suck it, Windy City. The quack attack is back. Great thing about a hawk is it tastes like chicken. Hashtag Hawks fans have no sense of humor. Hashtag beware the knuckle puck." Now this has got me to thinking, and maybe, I don't know, something, maybe they're making a Mighty Ducks 4. I can see where you kind of envision a movie. Coach Bombay coming back. You have Conway Bakes, the Bash Brothers. You get Goldberg out there. You get Julie the Cat out there. And you have the Ducks fighting for the Stanley Cup Finals. And then maybe Coach Bombay gets sick, or maybe an accident happens. You have to bring in the new coach. And I think the new coach could be Charlie Bombay. Bring in his brother in real life, Charlie Sheen. And he has to be named Charlie because on any other thing he does, he's named Charlie. Then maybe the Ducks go on with Charlie as a new coach, and maybe they don't like him at first. Maybe it's like when they went to high school and they didn't like the coach. They didn't understand his technique. But once they figured out the technique, they end up becoming in love with the coach. And maybe Emilio's there at the top of the stands, and when the Ducks win the Stanley Cup, he pushes a button and the banner comes down saying the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. Or maybe if he dies, you get Conway on a breakaway to win the game in the last seconds. And you see kind of just a little light come on in his head. Then you bring Kyle May to the press conference after Conway wins the game, and he can ask the question of, was Coach Bombay running around in that body down there? And if you don't know that Kyle May question, it's from a playoff game when Don Mattingly said Stan Musial was running around in Matt Carpenter's body. And if you don't understand the gist of that, you need to listen to better sports talk radio shows in St. Louis. But then you get your juices flowing, you get creative. You don't just want to make one movie, you want to make two. And it really wouldn't be a movie, it could be a documentary. As you kind of talk about that boxing match between Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, and you had a guy fighting on Spike TV over the week to challenge Mayweather for a fight. I don't think guys that are fighting on Spike TV should be challenging Mayweather to fights, but that was his own prerogative. But it got me thinking that could the second fight happen between Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather? And I got to talking about it with some people, and my brother was actually the one that brought up that maybe Pacquiao should just retire and go become king of the Philippines. And I think in this documentary, you have Manny singing all his own songs for his political campaign. Then you have Floyd Mayweather come in and do an endorsement, after Manny sings his little political thing, and say, you have Floyd come on and say, well, he wasn't scared to fight me, so he's not scared to fight for you. And I think that would just be something great. You see maybe Mayweather kind of getting off his high horse and helping another guy out. And you see Manny using his stature to get a guy like Floyd in to maybe help him win, even though he is already like a king over there. If he ran in for anything, he'd probably win. If he ran for dictator of the Philippines, he'd probably win that. Alright, that's going to do it for this week's show. I'm Robert Bowlesby, and this has been a Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network.